The Outer Worlds 2 is finally upon us, and if you're anything like me, you'll want your first playthrough to be glorious and not a chaotic scramble where you realise 10 hours in that you built your character to be about as useful as a chocolate fireguard. So, in today's video, I'm going to be going over 10 early game mistakes you definitely want to be avoiding and what you need to be doing instead so you can start off strong and not get frustrated when you're further into the game. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and get stuck in. First up, let's talk about spreading skill points everywhere, or perhaps spreading skill points too thinly, however you want to put it. One of the easiest traps to fall into early on is the I'll just be good at everything mindset. Now, the game presents you with a nice, shiny list of skills, and your brain goes, yep, I'll have all of those, please. So, what you do is you sprinkle points everywhere, maybe one in explosives, one in hacking, one in guns, one in sneak, one in science, and so on and so forth, as you level up early on. But what this does is basically turn you into the human equivalent of a low fat, zero sodium, flavor free broth. Technically functional, but no personality, and not helping anyone, certainly not yourself. One of the issues could be that early skill checks are designed around specialization, and if you don't push any one skill above others in the early thresholds, you'll constantly fail persuasion attempts, maybe hacking opportunities, and even basic weapon efficiency. Suddenly, combat feels weak, quests will get harder, and you'll miss shortcuts that players with focus skills breeze through. So, what you should be doing instead is picking maybe 3 or 4 core skill categories to define your character. For example, you could go down the route of conversation focused, where you persuade everyone, or you could decide your favourite playstyle is just to cause utter chaos and run and gun your way through everything and then ask questions later. Or perhaps you prefer to sneak, hack, and lockpick your way through the game. Once you commit to a playstyle instead of being average at everything, you'll feel much stronger almost immediately. And number 2 is taking traits and flaws without reading the downsides. And one thing I absolutely love about the Outer Worlds games is the flaws system. The game introduces flaws in a very encouraging tone, like it's kind of handing you a gift based on the perks you pick. It's like, hey, would you like this cool perk in exchange for a tiny, small, nearly unnoticeable lifelong disadvantage? And you think, yeah, sure, I love perks. And then 20 minutes later, you realize that you've taken something like minus 30% damage with ranged weapons, and you're playing a ranged build. At that point, you're essentially firing disappointed sighs instead of bullets. But flaws aren't bad by default. In fact, some of them are very manageable, but the game will punish you hard if you take a flaw that contradicts your chosen playstyle. And early game flaws can hurt the most in this situation because you don't have enough gear or perks to compensate for it. So only take flaws that you'd probably rarely use anyway based on your desired playstyle. For example, if you don't melee, then a melee flaw is fine. If you prefer to avoid stealth, then take the stealth penalty flaw. Maybe you don't like fighting up close. A defense flaw may barely matter to you. But if a flaw reduces your main source of damage or your primary survival tool, decline and then move on to something else. At number 3 is rushing the main story and ignoring the side stuff. If early on you just follow quest marker after quest marker without spending the time to do some exploration around the first areas, you're certainly missing out on a lot of things. If you're rushing through the main story, you'll miss out things like companion quests, useful loot, cheap upgrades, general world building, and not to mention the XP that makes the next area a little easier to navigate. So what you want to be doing instead is taking your time early on, explore the areas, explore the buildings, explore small outposts, talk to the NPCs, and just do some general side quests. This is basically the game teaching you how it works, what's going on, and not to mention it does reward you for paying more attention and exploring. And number 4, let's talk about your companions, and the mistake you can easily make with them is ignoring their skills and not leveling them up as you level up. Listen, these companions didn't leave their cozy corporate approved bunk beds just to stand there and watch you reload for 30 seconds behind a trash can without getting involved. As you level up throughout the game, you can and absolutely should be assigning skills to your companions at the same time. So, in the Outer Worlds 2, every 5 levels you go up, you're granted the opportunity to give a companion another skill. And these can range from anything like assisting you in combat by taking more enemy fire, having a higher chance of hitting enemy weak spots, healing you mid fight, amongst a whole bunch of other stuff. The point is, don't forget to open that companion screen every time you reach levels 5, 10, 15, 20, and so on. A slightly upgraded companion goes from, they exist and they're with me, to, oh wow, they're actually winning this fight for me while I finish my snack. Treat them right, level them up, they're basically your walking skill buffs, and occasionally emotional support murder gremlins. Number 5, let's talk about environmental hazards, and perhaps one of the easiest ways to make the early game way harder than it needs to be is just walk into those hazardous zones like those environments aren't actively trying to dissolve your lungs, melt your armor, or microwave your skeleton from the inside out. Different planets and regions in the Outer Worlds too have their own lovely environmental threats, and here's where a lot of players can go wrong because they treat hazards like regular damage. They think, I'll heal through it, it'll be fine. No, that's not how it works. Every second you're exposed, your health ticks down, your inhaler gets wasted, and your companion AI is quietly judging your life choices. So what should you be doing instead? Well, you want to make sure that you're always stocked up on specialized hazard gear, and going back to my point on exploring, completing side quests can reward you with special gear for these hazards. For example, to get the gas energy deflection apparatus, you need to complete the side quests, an Aegis against the miasma. God, I hope I said that correctly. But that gear will allow you to pass through otherwise impassable areas. So, respect the hazards, gear up for the climate, and you'll save resources, you'll stay alive longer, and you'll actually enjoy exploring instead of sprinting between pain clouds like a little panicked hamster. Number 6 is ignoring workbenches. Now, obviously, workbenches are where you'll be able to do a number of things like modifying and upgrading weapons and armor, and breaking down junk for materials. You should definitely not be ignoring these because in doing so, without those upgrades and modifications, your weapons will start to feel like they were built by a toy company that cares a lot about child safety guidelines. Workbenches aren't just for the late game optimization, they are core power progression from the very start. Adjusting a gun's damage, improving its accuracy, or boosting armor makes noticeable changes and immediate improvements. Even just tinkering a weapon up 2 or 3 levels can turn this enemy is an absolute bullet sponge to something rather satisfying. And a couple of tips here I would actually add is you should add a damage mod to at least one of your guns. More on that in just a minute. But keep tinkering with your weapons, keep tinkering with your armor so that you level up efficiently instead of using gear which is way below your level and more importantly, below the level of any enemies that you're going to be coming across. Number 7 is hoarding weapons. Early on in the Outer Worlds too, you're probably going to be coming across a large number of weapons like shotguns, pistols, rifles, heavy weapons, and so on and so forth. And you'll probably be thinking early on that every single one of these weapons is important and that you must keep absolutely every single one. Now, usually, at least in a lot of RPG games these days, that would rack up your carry limit in absolutely no time at all, and you'd be moving around as though you were dragging a fridge through the mud. But for once, that isn't the case here. But it is still a mistake to hoard all of these weapons because, well, you can break them down and use them for crafting instead, which is a much better use for those weapons than you having them sit there in your inventory unused like some sort of weapons museum. I would recommend figuring out maybe 4 or 5 weapons that suit your playstyle, stick to those, upgrade those, but ensure you have a couple of different damage types on those weapons as well. Which brings me nicely onto my next point. And that next point is not using the different damage types on different weapons. Now, in the Outer Worlds 2, there are a number of different damage types, and each of them have their advantages and disadvantages against certain enemy types that you're going to come across in the game, and you're making a mistake if you're just sticking to one damage type when playing the game. For example, let's say you have a weapon with corrosion damage. That makes it pretty damn good to use against enemies in armor, but it's not very good against creatures. Another example could be shock damage, which is pretty damn effective against automech enemies, but then you've also got plasma damage, which is basically rendered useless against those automechs, and they'd be stood there laughing at you using said plasma weapon. What should you do instead? Well, it's pretty simple. Always carry weapons with different damage types. Have at least one physical damage weapon because that can be used against all enemies, though it has no significant advantages. And then carry one or two elemental damage type weapons with you as well, and switch them up depending on what type of enemies you're fighting at the time. And number 9, ignoring armor ratings and just wearing whatever you think looks cool. Look, I get it, some armor sets just look right and some don't. Maybe the helmet matches your vibe, maybe the jacket says, I make questionable life choices, but I do it in style. But very early on in the Outer Worlds 2, armor rating matters more than you think it does when it comes to combat. Enemies can hit harder in this game compared to the first, and if your armor rating falls well behind, you'll be spending more time face first in the dirt than actually fighting. It's not that you can't wear the stylish pieces, it's just that the stylish pieces will betray you when the moment combat starts and if their armor rating isn't up to scratch. So instead, you need to be checking out armor ratings first and cosmetics second. And of course, remember, you can mod armor and add bonuses or switch back to fashion mode for hub areas where you're in combat. Find a balance in all things except loot. Always take more loot. Number 10, and the final mistake to avoid in the early game is not saving your game before major dialogue choices. Now, the Outer Worlds 2 absolutely loves to dish out consequences based on your actions or dialogue choices, and sometimes these choices can have major consequences, like maybe whole factions shift, companions gaining or losing trust, or a questline disappearing forever, and often you only realise these consequences after the conversation ends and suddenly everyone hates you. Instead, you should use multiple save slots in case you've decided you regret your decision in the game. I often say just before these major dialogue choices, make a save, or maybe before major quest steps as well. Trust me, a 12-second save point is much cheaper and much more efficient than restarting a 4-hour quest line in case you seriously regret one of your past choices. Well, there you have it, folks. There are 10 early game mistakes you want to be avoiding in the Outer Worlds 2, and what you should be doing instead. Now, are there any other early game mistakes that you think are worthy of this list? And if so, let me know in the comment section below. I hope you found this video useful, and let me know in the comments what's your build going to be. And if you are still here, it would be totally awesome if you could support my channel by hitting those like and subscribe buttons. You can now become a channel member as well, and as always, thank you for watching this video, and I hope to catch you in my next one.